But this kind of mindset bottlenecked for me to where it wasn't really working that well. But had I been taught a different kind of way to think, then this may not have happened. I may have had a much different experience. Hi there, welcome to Dev Brew. This is where indie developers send their games and I do my best to give feedback on their game design. For those who don't know, for those who are new here, the developer sends me a game and then I talk to them about their game design. So I'm sorry if it seems like I'm talking past you, it's because that's the way the show works. So we're gonna go straight into it. My first note here, what do I have? It says tutorialization and mindset of the player. So thank you for submitting Expansion Core to me. I played, I think around 3 hours, maybe 4 hours. I hope I didn't skip over anything that was too important. But yeah, so the first thing I wanted to talk about was what you talked about in your submission form. So when you submitted this game, you said that the opening tutorial was in pretty rough shape and that was the least proud part of this game for you. So I see what you're saying with the whole, what you call the opening tutorial. When I think opening tutorial, I'm thinking of that just the first part where you see the sign that says tutorial ahead. That whole little part is awesome. I really, really like that part. And that's what I think of when I think of opening tutorial. Of course, what you're referring to is the little gray cards that pop up and try to guide the person through the level as they, come out. I know what you're going for, and I know that the introduction of this whole game is in pretty rough shape, like you said, and it's in alpha release. When I'm looking at the tutorials, I'm wondering how you want to go about this, like how you would want to create the tutorial to make it more focused, I guess. Like you said, right now it is in rough shape, and there are times where you can just completely skip the tutorial if you want to. In fact, my gameplay, I went off like exploring the world because I thought I had to at one point. And I played for something like an hour just doing things that were not the tutorial. Like the tutorial kept telling me to do this one thing, but I had no idea what it was talking about. And then I realized that I had already done part of the tutorial in advance, and so I couldn't complete that step because it had already been done. So what I want to know then from you is, how do you plan on continuing this tutorial? How are you trying to design the rest of the game? Because the game, as it seems right now, seems pretty open, and the way that you're going about tutorializing seems to be two different kinds of tutorials. You have the very, very intro where you're introduced to the core, the doctor, I think, and you come out of this little area, which I think is brilliant. But as soon as you get out into the real world, then you have a step-by-step process guiding the player in a more or less open space. So what I want to know is, are you trying to tutorialize that part more like the first part, or is it more just a completely separate kind of tutorial, one that was less hands-on? And if it is less hands-on, I want to talk about a little bit about the mindset that you're trying to build with the player. I love the mechanics in this game a lot. The ingenuity in this game is really, really interesting. I don't think I've ever played a game quite like it. It's really cool. I like all the different kinds of things that you can do. I like the different kinds of creatures that there are. I like the mining, all kinds of stuff, the weather system, the weird tornado that comes around. It's all really interesting, but it's a game that I don't play typically. If you've been a part of this channel for a while, you understand that I'm not an RPG person. The abundance of choice that's in front of me just scares me. It's just way too much for me, and it gives me anxiety if I try to play with any kind of tactics or strategy. I can't do it. So games that are tutorialized, or at least give me a way of thinking, like teach me how to think about the game, then I really, really grab onto it. And this might be, I don't know, I might be the best kind of person to play this game because so much of it was incongruent with the way that I was thinking, if that's even the right word to use. So it would be nice to see people like me play this game that they're not typically into, because a lot of times I talk about the mindset of the player who is playing a game. And when I say mindset, I mean the way that the player approaches problems in a game and the way they see their choices. So for example, someone who's partial to action games, or actually, for example, this is a great example, me and Taylor, if you look back at the older videos, he used to be a part of this channel where he and I would talk about games and our different approaches for them. When it comes to playing games, he's really, really methodical about it. So he loves games like Dark Souls or Disco Elysium, whereas I play games like Sonic, and Session skateboarding sim. So when I play games like Dark Souls or any kind of RPGs like that, I feel like the game is too slow. And Taylor, when he approaches games that are really fast, he feels like they're too fast and gives him anxiety. So that's what I'm talking about when I talk about mindset. They already have an emotional connection with the type of game that you're presenting. So I want to know then if you're planning to connect with audiences that are already RPG lovers, or if you're trying to connect with a much wider audience. And I talked about this also in a video about Run for Cover. Run for Cover was another indie game that had this kind of thing where it was a tactical game that I have zero interest in tactical games, but I tried playing it and it was weird for me to play the game, but I understood all these action mindsets that were in my mind that was not matching, the gameplay itself. A lot of indie developers, whenever they submit a game to me, will usually develop the game specifically for them, right? For the person who made the game, because they're probably trying to create an experience that they want to see elsewhere and they haven't seen it. But because of that, only other people who are like them are going to play the game. Now, sometimes that can be really good, but sometimes, the person has a really unique taste and other people don't think like them. So it takes a little bit of a different mindset to approach these things. So I want to know what kind of mindset you want the audience to have when they're playing this game. Are you trying to give this to people who love RPGs, or is it a much wider audience? For me personally, because I'm more of the audience that's not into RPGs and stuff, I would love to see a game like this teach me how to think, and it was really, really good in the very, very beginning when I'm talking to the core in this little hub bot, I think is what it is, because what it showed me was just step-by-step process. It was just, pick these things, now destroy this wall, now go over here and do this, and it was really, really easy because there was simple processes that were happening, and it didn't feel like busy work to me because it felt like we were building up to a much bigger goal. Whereas when you step outside, there's so many things around you all at once. I like the step-by-step process, like it's fine, but it feels a little busy worky. And I wonder if it's because I'm not shown a goal. Like, for example, in the very beginning, I can see that there's a rock wall that's, stopping my forward path. So I do everything it says in order to get past that rock wall. And then I see a door, then I have to do everything in order to get past that door. So it feels more like a pretty simple puzzle game. It's like that tutorial itself is made into like a little puzzle. And I think I really like that. Whereas the stuff that later on that you step through don't feel like puzzles. For example, placing that first blueprint, trying to gather supplies to get into the blueprint, like it feels like busy work because it feels like there's no stretch goal. I'm going to place the blueprint, and then I'm going to gather supplies, and then I'm going to put that in there, and then I'm going to build that, then I'm going to use it for this, use that for this, and it just feels like a step-by-step process, and that's all it feels like. I'd like it to feel more like a puzzle, basically, like give the player something a little bit more to attach themselves to, like give them a goal to look forward to, and then try to build a skill in order for them to create this kind of mindset that you want them to have. Whether or not you're trying to do this tutorialization as a puzzle, or whether you're trying to improve the tutorial at all, I feel like there's a gradient of design that you want to look at. I just kind of came up with this like not too long ago, and I'm not sure if it holds true exactly, but it was something that I felt it helped me think about the types of design that there are. So if you imagine there's a gradient of different designs, right? Just a bunch of different designs. So there's two extremes, right? There's the completely controlled choices, and then there's the completely open choices. And then there's this whole gradient in the middle. Before we continue, hold on. I have a website, by the way. If you didn't know that, gamesover.coffee. It's a cool website, check it out. So if we look at this gradient, there's pros and cons to each of the extremes, right? In the controlled choices, you have, the pros are you have a very clear direction. You have something that's theoretically enjoyable by everyone because you're stepping them through the entire process. It's very mass appeal kind of thing. It's also very easy to follow. Okay, so those are things that are really nice to have about that. The cons, however, to a completely controlled choice is that the player does not feel free at all. They don't have almost any freedom. In fact, if you look at narrative games that strictly tell a story, or with QTEs, you'll have choices that barely matter, right? They're just choices that the player has to make, but they barely matter to the player. Like the player just has to press a button, and that's it. There's no expressiveness to it. That's the other thing, is that there's not much expressiveness in the game. What I mean by expressiveness is the player's ability to express themselves through the mechanics. And then there's a lack of agency. Completely controlled choices have those cons to them. Now, on the other end, you have completely open choices, which the pros are you have complete freedom. They can do anything they want to. Like in Minecraft, for example, they have complete agency over everything and 100% expressive. They can express themselves as much as they want through the mechanics. These kinds of games are games that have kind of goals, but they just kind of let the player do whatever they want in order to achieve that. And so it's 100% expressive. The player has lots of freedom and they have a lot of agency. And these games like Hitman, Minecraft, Teardown is another one. And of course the cons are, what was so pro about the controlled choices. The cons are you don't have clear choices. They can't be enjoyed by every single person because the person who comes into the game, if they're not tutorialized correctly, then they'll just be presented with an open world that they don't have any preconceptions of. So the person would have to be emotionally connected to the content first in order to get into it. It's also not very easy to follow. Again, this is completely open. If you're tutorializing, then it's different. Now, most games fit somewhere in between those two choices along the gradient, right? For example, silent tutorials are a form of controlled choices, but they're a little bit more open on the idea because they present the player with kind of just an openness to them, and it's up to the player to figure out how to go forward. And then a different place would be like Grand Theft Auto or even your game, where it's much more open, where the player is just kind of presented with this world, but there's some things that you should do. They're kind of just guided. These are more like almost any open world game is like that. So when I'm thinking about your game and your tutorial, I'm trying to figure out, are you trying to create a game that will be this open world thing that you just give the player pointers to go to and then go to those pointers and figure out how to do the thing? Or are you going to tutorialize every single little bit like you did in the very beginning? I think both have their pros to them, but for I think a more mass audience appeal, the more tutorialized version, the more controlled options, I think are the better ones to do for the mass audience. But it might not be what you want. It really, like it always does, it always depends on what you want to do with the game. That's all basically I have to say about the tutorial and everything. There is so much in this game that is so deep. There's a lot of options here. There's a lot of complexity. I'm really impressed with what you've done here because there's so much. And I think it's really cool. I think it's really interesting how many choices there are, how many different things you can do, and the types of situations you can, get yourself into. I had a pretty, emotional time in this game, not saying that I was like crying or anything, but being a first person view in a game that's all about like a RTS RPG kind of thing, it's interesting to have that kind of intimacy with everything. And I really like that idea because when I would create a robot, I felt like I was responsible for it. And then when it, I would try to protect it as it's protecting me. I would get sad, if my robots died. I was just like, oh no, what am I supposed to do, right? And I'm losing my army. Because this game isn't setting the mindset completely right in the beginning, I wanted to tell you a little bit about my experience playing this game because I felt like I had a bottleneck. And I think this is where it comes to mindset, and this is the reason why I want to talk about it. While I was playing the game, I felt like there was a strong sense of survival because there's a lot of adversity. You're trying to activate these beacons, basically. You have to go out and mine elements, from the rocks and stuff. It's all about gaining all these things, but you're facing adversity while doing so, and that's the big challenge. And so it feels like the challenge is to survive. My main gameplay was all about me building up as much of an army as I could, try to keep them alive, and then get the stuff that I want, and then go back and build whatever it was that I was trying to build. But I kept coming into situations where the robots would lose their health a lot, right? And then some of them would die. And I was trying to figure out how best to keep them alive, and I realized their health didn't regenerate. I tried to figure out if there was a way to make them regenerate health, but I couldn't figure out anything like that. So what it came down to was me trying to keep them alive and keep myself alive by using those energy things. I can't remember what they're called, energy crystals or something. But every time I would use those, it's like those are the things that I need the most to build whatever it is I was trying to build. So I'll lay down a blueprint and it's like, go get some energy stuff. And I'm like, all right, let's go get some energy stuff, get all my robots with me. Some of them die, and then I'm like, well, now I got to heal them by using the stuff that I need. I kept running into that situation where I would not have enough of the thing that I need. And usually the thing that I needed was the energy stuff, which can only be found in some animals, but not all of them. So it felt like I was going round in circles trying to get these energy stuff, but also trying to keep my people alive and everything. There is probably a much better way about going about all this. And this is what I mean about mindset, is because when I went into the game, that's the way I thought about everything. But this kind of mindset bottlenecked for me to where it wasn't really working that well. But had I been taught a different kind of way to think, then this may not have happened. I may have had a much different experience. Now that I'm analyzing the game and I'm thinking back on the other things that I could have done, one of the things I could have done is scrapped my robots when they died, and probably taken the energy crystal from them and then use that for whatever else, something else. I don't know if you can do that, but I imagine you can. The other thing is focusing more on upgrades, because I kept forgetting that upgrades were even a thing. I kept forgetting that cores were something that I needed to go get from the beacons in order to install in robots. I kept forgetting that my robots attack by themselves, and then sometimes I can tell them not to by using the follow commands and everything. But there's so many different options, so many different things in this game. Again, for my mindset, I was using them in a way that probably wasn't the best way. And so I think if you teach people how to use them in the way that you think makes the game fun, then that would be the way to tutorialize everything. So that's everything I have to say about this game, the Expansion Core. So right at this moment, the game is on Steam, but it says early access and its planned release date is October. So there's no button to actually download, at least not from what I can see. So you can wishlist the game if you so desire. The dev provided me with the Steam link, so you can check that out if you'd like. Yeah, so that's everything I have to say. So thank you so much for submitting this game, Expansion Core. As always, it was really interesting. And I have my coffee on the side here. You can't see it. Thank you for sticking around. Peace.